Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the news brief. And today we're talking about, well, what are we not talking about? So let's just get straight into it so you don't have to suffer through this news cycle alone, and I don't have to suffer through this news cycle alone. And of course, as per usual, please leave your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, anything you have on your mind, anything you want to get out there, because I love reading your comments and I love having this back and forth communication. Let's go. I swear, I thought that we would not have to talk about this again, but today we're talking about the peace deal and the minerals deal. So, of course, and I mean, surprise, surprise, really, Russia kind of backed out of the peace deal, but not in like your traditional way that you would think. They backed out of the peace deal with some spice added to it. First of all, they said that really they have no reason to adhere to the ceasefire on the energy infrastructure because bad Ukraine tries to target their oil and energy infrastructure every day. And of course, since this bad Ukraine tries to do that, they should be doing it in return. Well, newsflash, Russia actually did not adhere to the ceasefire quite literally 40 minutes after promising it. But of course, for some reason, neither the Trump administration is talking about it, nor is Russia admitting to it. The Trump administration tried to actually justify it by saying that no. Well, the order to do those strikes was given before Putin hung up the phone with Trump. Right. And then Russia basically put forth its conditions for the peace deal because, of course, Russia, the terrorist state that literally invaded Ukraine, should be putting out conditions. But we know what Russia is like and we know what Russia does. So here is this blessing that we have received in the form of conditions. Putin suggested to put Ukraine under the UN governance. Yes, an external governance temporarily, of course. So Ukraine could hold an election and elect a trustworthy government that the people would be happy with and the people would be okay with, and then proceed to talk about the ceasefire. And of course, under the fellowship of the UN, and he said that he would love China actually to participate in in overseeing this UN governance. But he's open to the UK, Europe, and the United States overseeing it as well. Although he does believe that Europe particularly is trying to trick him and is trying to beat around the bush and is trying to distract him, of course, because Europe calls him out every day and doesn't let him do all of the horrendous things that he wants to do. Effectively, he pulled out of the peace deal by saying that because, first of all, it's illegal to hold elections in Ukraine under martial law. Second of all, Ukrainians consistently keep saying that we're okay with our government because we are. We're happy with our government. We understand our laws. We understand that it's martial law, and we understand that we can't hold elections. It's not about international observance of the elections. It's about the fact that a lot of people are in occupation and they can't vote. A lot of people are abroad and consulates are not going to be able to facilitate these elections in such a short period of time. A lot of people are at the front fighting. There are so many factors that play into this. Also, of course, the polling stations would be a huge target for Russia because Russia loves targeting public spaces that have large gatherings of civilians in them. So yeah, that's a no-no. And again, that would guarantee Putin exactly what he wanted. This is just like a tricky beating around the bush, veiled way to overthrow Zelensky, which is something that he's been wanting to do since day one. He also keeps pushing his propaganda about Azov in this peace deal negotiation, while saying that, of course, Zelensky needs to be changed for a trustworthy government because Azov is effectively Azov, the Nazi organization, which they're not. They're a military, they're a special forces military unit. Azov, the military organization, is getting unhinged political power in Ukraine. Azov is nowhere near politics. Azov is at the front. Of course, Azov has grown from a regiment to a battalion, but not in politics, in the military. And they do their best and their job defending the front lines. I'm actually going to read it to you word for word so you can enjoy it yourself. Under the auspices of the United Nations, with the United States, even with European countries, and of course, with our partners and friends, we could discuss the possibility of introduction of temporary governance in Ukraine. Putin said, adding that It would allow the country to hold democratic elections to bring to power a viable government that enjoys the trust of the people and then begin negotiations with them on a peace treaty. There is not going to be any election until the war is over and we have achieved a just peace. Just peace, not Putin's demands. He added that such external governance is just one of the options, without elaborating, obviously. And Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, actually had one of the best responses to it, saying they're playing games and they're playing for time. We can't let them drag this out while they continue prosecuting their illegal invasion.
And it's now, obviously, over 2 weeks since Ukraine agreed to an immediate 30-day ceasefire. That offer is still unanswered. It's over a week since Putin agreed to an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, but since then, Russia has hit energy infrastructure in cities across Ukraine. They've increased their bombardment, firing over 1,000 long-range drones at the country, hitting Ukrainian homes, schools and hospitals, with widespread civilian casualties. One drone killed a mother, a father and their daughter, an innocent family. Then this week we saw the agreement on a ceasefire in the Black Sea. I welcomed this as a vital first step forward, but within a few minutes of the announcement, Russia set out new conditions and delays. Now, President Trump has rightly called them out for dragging their feet. And we agreed here in Paris today that it's clear the Russians are filibustering. They are playing games and they're playing for time. It is a classic from the Putin playbook. But we can't let them drag this out while they continue prosecuting their illegal invasion. Instead, we should be setting a framework and a deadline of delivering real progress. And then we should hold them to that deadline. So here in Paris, we've agreed that we must go further now to support the peace process, support Ukraine, and increase the pressure on Russia to get serious. That means, first, stepping up the military pressure. So the Defence Secretary will chair the next Ukraine Defence Contact Group on the 11th of April to marshal more military aid and keep Ukraine in the fight. Because peace comes through strength. That was one of the main messages reasserted today and emphasised today all around the table and the meeting. Second, it means increasing the economic pressure on Russia, accelerating new, tougher sanctions, bearing down on Russia's energy revenues, and working together to make this pressure count. We also discussed how we can support the implementation of a full or partial ceasefire when it is in place, and how we can build on efforts towards negotiations on a just and lasting peace. That remains our shared goal, and it's what the Coalition of the Willing is designed to support. The political will from partners here today was clear. And this week in London, we hosted over 200 military planners from 30 countries, coming forward with contributions on everything from logistics and command and control to deployments on land, on air, and on sea. That work continues at pace. We will be ready to operationalise a peace deal whenever its precise shape turns out to be. And we will work together to ensure Ukraine's security so it can defend and deter against future attacks. This is Europe mobilising together behind the peace process on a scale that we haven't seen for decades. Backed by partners from around the world, we are determined to deliver a just and lasting peace, because we know that it is vital for Ukraine and Europe as a whole. And I am clear that it's also vital for Britain.
And that reaction is the reaction that the entirety of the world should have had. But as per usual, we come back to the US, that recently, of course, has been acting very much in favor of Russia and very much undermining and detrimental to Ukraine. So Marco Rubio came out and said that actually the US is backtracking on its promise to end the war in Ukraine within 100 days. I mean, you might remember that Trump said the war was going to be over within the first 24 hours of his presidency. Then he actually looked into it and realized that it is not going to be over in 24 hours. And he said that it needs to end within 100 days. Marco Rubio said that it's not going to end within 100 days, and now it's going to take however long it takes until the war is over, right? However long it needs. So basically, he said as long as it takes. So we have that back from the Biden administration, but in a different key. Same stuff, different font. This time, the as long as it takes is about negotiations, not about support of Ukraine. The funny thing here, or it's actually not funny, it's quite sad, but I don't think that they're pulling out of the 100-day thing because they've realized that it's going to be much harder to negotiate. I think they're pulling out of the 100 days thing promise because they're realizing that they're not going to be able to achieve peace. And of course, the last thing that Trump wants is to look like a fool. They've tried forcing Ukraine into surrender to Russia, or they tried basically doing whatever they can in order to make Ukraine make the most amount of concessions. Couldn't do it. They thought it was going to be easy. Of course, they've tried talking to Russia, and now they understand that Russia is actually not even going to make minor concessions in order to make this peace deal look kind of like a legitimate thing. And they've realized that Russia is just going to continue trying to achieve all of the conditions that they've had from day one. So they're not going to be able to broker this. In response, I think, well, I don't think it's necessarily in response because, of course, like these things take a while to draft, but they likely had it prepared for a while. But in response to this recent commentary into the situation, the U.S. came out with a new proposal for the minerals deal with Ukraine. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of I think a lot of people, this minerals deal is quite literally meant for Ukraine to refuse to sign it. So the US can say, see, Ukraine doesn't want peace. Ukraine, bad, bad Ukraine, because we always blame Ukraine for everything, right? And this deal is meant to basically paint Ukraine as the body that doesn't want peace, that is very difficult to work with, and make it easier for the US to flush Ukraine and work with Russia because they want economic partnerships with Russia, strong economic partnerships, and they want to kind of form a coalition with Russia against China, which I think is so funny and so naive. Like, just as they discovered that they're not going to be able to force Russia's hand on anything or agree with it on anything in terms of Ukraine or even try to make it look a little just, they're going to find out that Russia is never going to enter into a coalition with the US against China because Russia wants the US to be destroyed. Like, Russia wants the US to fall apart. It's enjoying what's happening in the America politically right now so much. Trust me. So, anyways, the new draft of the US minerals deal revives fears over Ukraine's accession to the EU. First of all, by giving American companies preferential treatment in Ukraine, the proposed mineral deal runs the risk of contradicting EU's competition and single market rules, which provide for equal and fair success. So there are a lot of problems with this deal. First of all, this deal basically says that all of the profits from the fund are going to be going to the US. And then the US could reinvest them into Ukraine. We're going to get into specifics a little more. But in the EU, basically, one of the things is this line has been conveyed. Such an agreement would need to be looked into from the perspective of the relations between Ukraine and the EU, and notably in terms of the accession negotiation. We cannot make any assessment unless and until there is such a concrete agreement with the letters in black and white, which allows us to make the assessment of any impact from the different policy angles that might arise. Under the draft, the fund's board would comprise 5 members, 3 appointed by the US and 2 appointed by Ukraine. In practice, this would give Washington an effective veto power on key decisions regarding new projects of infrastructure and natural resources. Existing projects appear beyond the control. Roads, railways, ports, mines, oil, gas, and the extraction of critical minerals would all fall under the scope of the new structure. Ukraine would be obliged to present all new projects to the fund for review as early as practicable. If the project were turned down, Ukraine would be prevented from offering it to other parties with materially better conditions. So no one but the US is allowed to participate in this. Ukraine also has to repay the US the exact amount of financial aid or military aid in terms of like how much the US has spent before Ukraine can even start profiting from this, or before anything can be reinvested into Ukraine. Additionally, the US would have the right to reap all the profits from the fund and a 4% annual return until the military and financial aid that has been provided to Ukraine is fully recouped. The Kiel Institute for the World Economy estimates American support to be worth 114 billion euros since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Not all of it actually has arrived into Ukraine still. The payback model has been central to Donald Trump's motivation to sign the deal, raising accusations of exploitation and neo-colonialism. So there is a huge conflict of interest here with Europe. Here, by giving American companies a legally enshrined right of first offer, the deal is in direct contradiction with the bloc's competition and single market rules, which provide for fair and equal access for all economic actors, regardless of nationality. There should be open competition for all investors in the project. In open traders, EU companies and American companies should participate and compete on equal terms. I can see there is a conflict of interest. So basically, under this deal, American companies have to get preference, and basically what America says goes. The provisions agreed in the previous versions were balanced with Ukrainian interests. Now it's again unbalanced in the favor of the United States. There is also no security guarantees. I thought we already agreed that there would be a framework agreement, but now, as I understand, the Ukrainian and American teams are working on it now because America is changing these rules now and proposes to sign the deal immediately. Full agreement. So the United States is really forcing Ukraine into this, right? They're really, really trying to force Ukraine to sign it, which is so not okay. Absolutely. It's forcing Ukraine's hand. Again, Ukraine, one of Ukraine's main goals was NATO and the EU. Now the US is assuring Russia that Ukraine will never get into NATO, and now they're making it impossible for Ukraine to get into the EU if we sign this deal. If we don't sign this deal, right, then America is not going to provide us with military aid or like whatever things they're going to start doing, but they're definitely going to be petty, and they're definitely going to be looking for payback, and they're definitely going to be looking for a reason to stop supporting us at all. But this deal essentially makes Ukraine America's new colony, like in a colonial way, which is like, okay, I mean, so first you were trying to force us into a peace agreement and into a ceasefire that was beneficial to no one but Russia, and you were trying to force our hand into making concessions that were absolutely ridiculous. Now you're trying to force us to become your colony where we have absolutely no sort of like governance over ourselves. Yeah, right. So the US basically wants to put it out there, wants Ukraine to say no to this deal, while then spinning it as like, oh, we tried, we gave them this great offer. Trump is going to say his $300 billion like expenditure thing again, which is not true. And then they're going to try and act this, in fact, is Ukraine's fault, that this deal didn't happen and that this deal was great and generous and amazing and like whatever. But in reality, it quite literally turns Ukraine into America's colony. Several Ukrainian lawmakers suggested that Ukraine could not possibly accept such a deal and that new negotiations would be needed. President Volodymyr Zelensky told reporters in Paris on Thursday that the new proposal required detailed study and suggested that a final agreement was still far off. But he also said he did not want to leave the US with the feeling that Ukraine is against it in general. We support the cooperation with the US. We don't want to send any signals that could lead the US to stop aid to Ukraine. Well, obviously, but the US, I think, is trying to stop aid to Ukraine and trying to justify it on the world scene. The new proposal reverts to President Trump's initial demand that Ukraine repay the United States for the billions Kyiv has received in military and financial aid since Russia's full-scale invasion 3 years ago, 90% of which actually stayed in the US, and the US benefited from this war and made money because war is profitable for the United States, and that's God-honest truth. The new draft also echoes earlier versions by omitting any mention of security guarantees for Ukraine. So basically, this deal gives us nothing. As in earlier proposals, Ukraine would have to contribute half of its revenue from natural resource projects and related infrastructure such as ports and pipelines to a US controlled investment fund. Profit from the fund would be reinvested in Ukrainian natural resource projects, though the exact share of such profit it remained unclear. Then there is also this very interesting thing. The new proposal also outlines specifics for the role of the International Development Finance Cooperation, a US government agency responsible for investing in companies and projects abroad. The agency would control the fund by nominating 3 board members, while Ukraine would have 2. We talked about that. The agency would also oversee each project where earnings from the fund are invested. So, yeah, this basically effectively turns Ukraine into an American colony. Roman Sheremeta, a Ukrainian economist and founding rector of the American University in Kyiv, wrote on Twitter, Elon Musk's platform. So basically, what happens next is there is likely going to be rounds of negotiations, but what can also happen is because Trump and his administration are trying to force Ukraine into signing this immediately, as I've already repeated so many times, I think that the US is using this as like a Trojan horse, right? And the US has been using it as a Trojan horse. Of course, for Trump administration, they all love Russia to begin with, and they've all advocated for Russia and showed their sympathetic attitude towards Russia. Let's just remember Steve Witkoff and his interview with Tucker Carlson that I just talked about in the previous episode, which was such a disgrace. But point is, they all want to work with Russia. Trump has ties going back to Russia in the 80s, right? Like, it's just it basically looks like they're tired of this negotiations process. Trump wasn't able to make himself look as this like fantastic Churchill, like, peace deal maker, best deal maker in the world type of thing, drone show in Florida. He wasn't able to make himself look good, and he wasn't able to make himself look like this amazing, fantastic, cool, I don't know, omnipotent, omniscient leader who can do anything and everything. And now he just wants to quickly flush Ukraine, have a good excuse for it, and then basically take off sanctions off of Russia and start trading with Russia and start going back to normal with Russia. And I mean, this is the thing. Like I said from the very beginning, I don't think we should. I don't think we should at all trust the Trump administration, and I don't think that they have anyone's best interest in mind. I think that they're incredibly sympathetic to Russia. I don't necessarily believe in the conspiracies of the Manchurian candidate. I think that they're useful idiots for Russia, and I think that Russia cannot believe how much it lucked out with Trump and his administration, because it's truly uncanny how good the situation is for them, because Russia doesn't even have to manipulate the United States in order for them to do stuff that both destroys the United States and makes it worse for the world. In my view, I mean, of course, I'm, not a fortune teller, and the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks are going to, we're going to be able to tell. But like, as I said earlier, it just all comes down to Trump's ego. He has this like weird affinity for Putin and for Putin's respect of him, which he doesn't have. And yeah, I mean, they're going to screw over most of the world. I think they're going to flush Ukraine. And I think that everything that I've predicted before, all of this is going to happen. I do think they're going to use this mineral deal. I do think that they're going to use Ukraine refusing to sign this obviously terrible uh, mineral deal as like an excuse to stop aid. And of course, it's kind of funny because, right, like we don't want to be Russia's colony. We're fighting for our independence. So America was like, well, we're going to make you our colony, and we're going to take all of your resources, and we're basically going to install, like, we're going to make you. Oh, here's the thing. You know how all of these trolls say that Ukraine is a proxy state of the US and it's a proxy war? Well, the US legitimately wants to make Ukraine a proxy state and a colony. Yeah, I mean, I thought that we're not in the 1800s and the early not 1900s, but I suppose, it's 8 o'clock in Belgium. It's whatever time it is in Australia, and it's 1939 in the United States. And that's unfortunately the note on which I leave you today. Give me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. Do you think that the US is just trying to use it as a Trojan horse? Or do you think there's ulterior motivations or motives rather? And yeah, do let me know. If you like this video, please don't forget to literally like it. leave a comment, send it to a friend, give me all your thoughts and observations. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And not only that, but also turn on your notifications so you don't miss when my next rant comes out. See you next time.